The black Mercedes SUV idled 3 cars behind her rusted Honda Civic as she pulled into the cemetery parking lot for the 3rd time this week. Christopher Hamilton, 38, gripped his leather steering wheel with manicured fingers, his steel-gray eyes locked on the woman stepping out of her car. At 6 feet 2 inches with perfectly styled dark hair and a jawline that could cut glass, he was used to being the one people watched, not the other way around. But for 2 weeks now, this woman had consumed his thoughts like a fever he couldn't shake. Why does a widow visit 3 different graves every single week? Hey beautiful souls, welcome back to another story that's going to leave you absolutely speechless. I hope you're having an amazing day, wherever you're watching from around the world. If you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button because trust me, after today's story, you're going to want to see what we uncover next. Now, let's dive into something that will change how you see the world forever. The woman, Zara Williams, though he didn't know her name yet, was 34, with rich dark skin that seemed to glow even in the gray October afternoon. Her natural hair was pulled into a simple ponytail, and despite her worn jeans and faded sweater, she moved with a grace that made Christopher's chest tighten in ways he couldn't understand. She carried 3 small bouquets. Always 3. Christopher had built his fortune on reading people, on understanding their patterns and motivations. Hamilton Industries didn't become a billion-dollar empire by accident. But this woman, she was a mystery wrapped in poverty that his privileged mind couldn't decode. It had started accidentally. 2 weeks ago, he'd been leaving his therapist's office, court-mandated after his ugly divorce, when he'd seen her in the parking garage. She'd been sitting in her car, crying so hard her entire body shook. Something about her raw pain had stopped him cold. Maybe it was because his ex-wife Rachel's tears had always been calculated, weaponized. But this woman's grief was pure, devastating, real. He'd found himself following her that day. Not with any malicious intent, at least, that's what he told himself. He was just curious. Now, watching her walk toward the first headstone with measured steps, Christopher felt like a man possessed. She knelt down, placed 1 bouquet, and began talking to the grave in a voice too soft for him to hear from his hidden position behind a large oak tree. Who are you mourning, Zara Williams? Yes, he'd hired a private investigator. Sue him. Her husband had died 6 months ago, cancer. No children. Worked 2 jobs, nights at a diner, weekends cleaning offices. Barely scraping by. But that didn't explain the 3 graves. Or why she spent exactly 7 minutes at each one, like a ritual. Or why she always brought the same flowers, white roses, yellow daisies, and baby's breath. Christopher adjusted his $3,000 watch and stepped closer, staying hidden behind the monuments. His Italian leather shoes made no sound on the damp grass, a skill he'd learned during his military days, before Harvard Business School, before inheriting his father's empire. Zara stood up, wiping her eyes, and moved to the second grave 20 yards away. This time Christopher could hear fragments of her voice carried on the wind. Told you I'd take care of her. Promise I won't let you down. Her? A chill ran down Christopher's spine that had nothing to do with the October air. His investigator had said no children. So who was her? The 3rd grave was newer, the headstone still sharp-edged and unweathered. Zara's shoulders began to shake again as she approached it, and when she knelt down, her words came out in broken sobs. I'm trying, baby girl. I'm trying so hard, but the medicine costs so much, and I don't know how much longer I can. Christopher's blood turned to ice. Baby girl? The investigator had been wrong. Or, incomplete. Zara pressed her forehead against the small headstone, her entire body racked with grief so profound it made Christopher's throat close up. He'd never seen pain like this, raw, honest, soul-deep. When she finally stood up, her tear-streaked face was turned directly toward him. For one heart-stopping moment, their eyes met across the cemetery. Christopher felt the world tilt on its axis. This close, he could see the exhaustion etched into her beautiful features, the way her sweater hung loose on a frame that had clearly lost weight from stress and skipped meals. But her eyes. God, her eyes held a strength that made his chest ache. Neither moved. The moment stretched like a held breath. Then Zara's phone buzzed. She glanced down, and her face crumpled. No, she whispered, pressing the phone to her ear. Please, Dr. Rodriguez, just give me until Friday. I can get the money by Friday. Christopher couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but he watched Zara's shoulders sag in defeat. I understand, she said quietly. I'll figure something out. She hung up and sank back down to her knees, this time not at a grave, but right there in the grass, as if her legs had simply given out. That's when Christopher saw it, truly saw it, for the first time. This wasn't just about mourning. This was about something far more desperate, far more immediate. This was about someone who was still alive, and running out of time. What do you think Christopher just realized? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I have a feeling this is going to be more shocking than any of us imagined. Christopher's hands trembled as he watched Zara crumble in the cemetery grass, her phone clutched against her chest like a lifeline that had just been severed. Every instinct screamed at him to walk away, to get back in his Mercedes and pretend he'd never seen this moment of devastating vulnerability. But something deeper, something he'd buried under years of corporate ruthlessness and emotional walls, kept his feet planted firmly behind that oak tree. Zara pulled herself together with the kind of strength that only comes from practice. She wiped her face with the back of her sleeve, straightened her shoulders, and began walking back toward her battered Honda Civic. Christopher found himself following at a distance, his heart hammering against his ribs. She didn't drive home. Instead, she pulled into the parking lot of St. Mary's Children's Hospital. Children's Hospital. The pieces of the puzzle were rearranging themselves in Christopher's mind, forming a picture that made his stomach drop. The third grave, the small headstone, the phone call about medicine and money. Zara sat in her car for a full 5 minutes, staring at the hospital entrance. Even from across the parking lot, Christopher could see her hands shaking on the steering wheel. She was gathering courage for something that required every ounce of strength she had left. When she finally walked through those glass doors, Christopher waited exactly 60 seconds before following. The pediatric wing smelled like industrial disinfectant and broken dreams. Christopher had donated millions to hospitals like this one, had posed for photos at charity galas, had written checks that made board members weep with gratitude. But he'd never actually been in one. Not like this. Not as someone whose heart was about to shatter. He spotted Zara at the nurse's station, speaking in hushed tones with a woman in scrubs whose face was etched with professional sympathy. "Room 314, the nurse said softly. "She's been asking for you." Christopher's throat constricted. He followed at a safe distance as Zara walked down the hallway, her steps getting slower with each door they passed. 312, 313, 314. Through the small window in the door, Christopher saw something that stopped his world completely. A little girl, no more than 7 years old, lay in a hospital bed that dwarfed her tiny frame. Her dark skin had an ashen undertone that spoke of serious illness, and her natural hair was partially hidden under a colorful headscarf that someone had clearly chosen to make her smile. But it was her eyes, bright, intelligent, achingly familiar, that made Christopher's knees nearly buckle. She had Zara's eyes. "Mama Zara." The little girl's voice was weak but filled with pure joy as Zara entered the room. "You came back." Mama Zara. Not biological mother. Foster mother, maybe. Or something more complicated. Christopher pressed himself against the wall outside the room, close enough to hear but hidden from view. His moral compass was screaming at him. This was private, sacred, none of his business. But he couldn't walk away. Not now. "Of course I came back, baby girl." Zara's voice was thick with forced cheerfulness. "How are you feeling today?" "Better," the little girl lied with the kind of practiced optimism that children develop when they're trying to protect the adults they love. "Dr. Rodriguez says I might get to go home soon." Christopher heard Zara's sharp intake of breath. He knew, as she did, that Dr. Rodriguez had said no such thing. Not after that phone call in the cemetery. "That's wonderful, sweet pea," Zara managed. "What do you want to do when you get home?" "Can we go to the zoo? You promised we'd see the elephants when I got better." "Absolutely. The biggest elephants they have." Christopher closed his eyes, his chest burning. The phone call in the cemetery suddenly made perfect sense. "Please, Dr. Rodriguez, just give me until Friday. I can get the money by Friday." This child needed treatment that Zara couldn't afford. And judging by the conversation, time was running out. "Mama Zara." The little girl's voice grew smaller. "Are you sad?" "No, baby. Why would you ask that? You have your sad eyes. The same ones you had when you told me about Daddy Marcus going to heaven." Christopher's blood froze. Daddy Marcus. The husband who died 6 months ago. This child had lost her father, and now. I'm not sad, Lily, Zara whispered, and Christopher could hear her fighting back tears. I'm just thinking about how much I love you. Lily. The little girl had a name now, and somehow that made everything more real, more urgent. I love you too, Mama Zara. More than all the stars. More than all the stars, Zara repeated, and Christopher could hear the smile through her tears. A nurse entered the room, and Christopher heard the rustle of papers. Mrs. Williams? Could I speak with you outside for a moment? Christopher's pulse spiked. He ducked into an empty room across the hall, leaving the door cracked just enough to hear. I'm sorry, the nurse said quietly once they were in the hallway. Dr. Rodriguez asked me to speak with you about Lily's treatment plan. We discussed this already, Zara's voice was steady, but Christopher could hear the desperation underneath. I just need until Friday. I'm working extra shifts, and I have a lead on. Mrs. Williams. The nurse's voice was gentle but firm. The insurance company denied the claim again. Without the specialized treatment, Lily has maybe 3 weeks. We can make her comfortable, but... The silence that followed was deafening. How much? Zara whispered. For the full treatment protocol? $250,000. Christopher felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. $250,000. Pocket change for him. A fortune for a woman working 2 minimum wage jobs. I'll find a way, Zara said, and the fierce determination in her voice made Christopher's heart crack wide open. I promised her daddy I'd take care of her. I promised. Mrs. Williams. I'll find a way, Zara repeated, stronger now. Just give me a little more time. Christopher heard footsteps as Zara went back into Lily's room. His mind was reeling, calculating, processing what he'd just learned. This woman, this stranger he'd been following like some kind of stalker, was fighting to save a child who wasn't even biologically hers. A child she'd inherited when her husband died. A child she was willing to work herself to death trying to save. And she was going to lose. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Without intervention, this little girl was going to die, and Zara was going to have to bury a 4th person she loved. The 3rd grave in the cemetery, that would be Lily's father, Marcus. The other 2 must be family members Zara had lost before. How much grief can one person carry? Christopher leaned against the hospital wall, his expensive suit suddenly feeling like a costume, his wealth like a weight he'd never truly understood before this moment. Through the door, he could hear Lily giggling at something Zara was saying. The sound was pure joy, innocent and bright, completely unaware that her world was counting down in days instead of years. That's when Christopher made a decision that would change everything. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. Hamilton Industries, Legal Department. Margaret, it's Christopher. I need you to prepare a cashier's check immediately. $250,000. Mr. Hamilton? For what account? What's this regarding? Christopher looked through the window at Zara holding Lily's small hand, both of them smiling despite everything falling apart around them. It's regarding something I should have done a long time ago, he said quietly. Something I should have understood years ago. Sir. Just prepare the check, Margaret. I'll be there in an hour. As Christopher hung up and walked toward the elevator, he had no idea that his life, and Zara's, was about to become infinitely more complicated than either of them could imagine. Because some acts of kindness don't just save lives. They create connections that can never be undone. What do you think is going to happen when Zara discovers what Christopher has done? This story is about to take a turn that will leave you breathless. Let me know your predictions in the comments. Christopher's hands were steady as he signed the cashier's check at his downtown office, but his mind was racing at light speed. $250,000. He'd spent more than that on his watch collection, yet somehow this felt like the most significant financial decision of his life. Mr. Hamilton, Margaret, his head legal counsel, peered at him over her wire-rimmed glasses. Are you certain about this? No paperwork, no contract, no tax documentation. Just the check, Margaret. But sir, this is a substantial charitable donation. We should at least. It's not charity. The words came out sharper than he intended. It's something else entirely. Something he didn't have words for yet. By the time Christopher returned to St. Mary's Children's Hospital, visiting hours were nearly over. The pediatric wing had settled into the quiet hum of evening routines, dinner trays being collected, medications being distributed, families saying their temporary goodbyes. He found Dr. Rodriguez at the nurse's station, a tired-looking man in his 50s with kind eyes and the sort of gentle demeanor that made children trust him instantly. "Dr. Rodriguez? I'm Christopher Hamilton. I'd like to discuss Lily Williams' treatment." The doctor looked up from his charts, clearly puzzled. "I'm sorry, are you family? I can only discuss patient information with." Christopher placed the cashier's check on the counter. "I'm someone who wants to help." Dr. Rodriguez stared at the check for a long moment, his eyes widening as he processed the amount. "Mr. Hamilton, this is incredibly generous, but I don't understand. Do you know the Williams family?" "Not exactly." Christopher felt heat rise in his cheeks. How could he explain that he'd been essentially stalking Zara? That he'd overheard private conversations he had no business hearing? "Let's just say I'm aware of their situation, and I'd like to ensure Lily gets the treatment she needs. This is the full amount for her specialized treatment protocol." Dr. Rodriguez picked up the check with reverent hands. "Mr. Hamilton, you have no idea what this means. This little girl has a fighting chance now." "There's one condition," Christopher said quickly. "Mrs. Williams cannot know this came from me. As far as she's concerned, this is an anonymous donation. Can you arrange that?" Dr. Rodriguez studied him with a sort of penetrating gaze that came from years of reading people in crisis. "May I ask why the secrecy?" "Because she wouldn't accept it if she knew it came from me. Because I've been following her like a creep, and she has every right to call the police." "And how do you know Mrs. Williams?" Christopher's mouth went dry. We've never officially met." The doctor's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "Mr. Hamilton, I appreciate your generosity, but this raises some concerns. How did you know about Lily's condition? How do you know what Mrs. Williams would or wouldn't accept?" "Shit." Christopher had anticipated questions about the money, but he hadn't thought through the logistics of being a mysterious benefactor. In his business world, people rarely questioned large sums of money, they just said thank you and moved on. I saw them here. I donate to children's hospitals regularly, and I happened to overhear." "You overheard confidential medical information?" Dr. Rodriguez's voice grew stern. "Mr. Hamilton, there are privacy laws that protect our patients. If you've been..." "I haven't done anything illegal," Christopher said quickly, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. "I just want to help a child who needs it. Isn't that what matters?" Before Dr. Rodriguez could respond, the elevator doors opened, and Zara Williams stepped out. Christopher's heart stopped. She looked exhausted, more so than she had at the cemetery. Her work uniform suggested she'd come straight from her diner shift, and there were new lines of stress around her eyes that hadn't been there that morning. "Dr. Rodriguez," she called out, hurrying toward the nurse's station. "I got your message. You said there was news about Lily's treatment." Christopher felt trapped. He couldn't leave without looking suspicious, but if he stayed, Zara would see him. And after their brief eye contact at the cemetery, she might recognize him. Too late. Zara's steps faltered as she spotted Christopher standing at the nurse's station. Her brow furrowed in confusion, then recognition flickered across her features. "You," she said slowly. "You were at Riverside Cemetery today. Behind the oak tree." Christopher's blood turned to ice. I'm sorry." "Don't." Zara's voice was sharp now, her exhaustion replaced by something harder. "I saw you. You were watching me." She turned to Dr. Rodriguez, pieces clicking together in her mind. Who is this man? What does he have to do with Lily? Dr. Rodriguez looked between them, clearly uncomfortable. "Mrs. Williams, this is Mr. Hamilton. He's made a very generous donation toward Lily's treatment." "What?" Zara's voice cracked like a whip. "What kind of donation?" "The full amount," Dr. Rodriguez said gently. "Lily can begin the specialized treatment protocol immediately." Christopher watched Zara's face cycle through shock, confusion, and then something that looked dangerously close to rage. "No," she said flatly. "Absolutely not. Mrs. Williams, I understand this is overwhelming, but you don't understand anything. Zara whirled on Christopher, her eyes blazing. Who are you? Why were you following me? And why are you trying to pay for my daughter's medical treatment? She's not, Christopher stopped himself before saying your daughter. That wasn't his business to point out. I just wanted to help. Help. Zara's laugh was bitter. You've been stalking me. Following me to private family moments, eavesdropping on conversations that had nothing to do with you, and now you think you can just, what? Buy your way into our lives. It's not like that, Christopher said, but even as the words left his mouth, he realized how it must look. I saw you in pain, and I have the means to help. That's all this is. That's all. Zara stepped closer, and Christopher could see the fire in her dark eyes. Do you have any idea what you've just done? Do you understand what it means to take away someone's right to fight for their own child? I was trying to save her life. By making me a charity case. Zara's voice broke on the last words. By turning me into someone who needs to be rescued by a rich man who gets his kicks from watching poor people struggle. That's not, Christopher felt his own anger rising. I don't get kicks from watching anyone struggle. I was trying to do something good. Good. Zara turned back to Dr. Rodriguez. Return his money. All of it. Dr. Rodriguez looked stricken. Mrs. Williams, please think about what you're saying. Lily needs this treatment. Lily needs it from someone who isn't treating us like we're entertainment, Zara shot back. Someone who didn't violate our privacy to insert himself into our lives. Christopher felt something crack inside his chest. You think I'm doing this for entertainment? I think you're a bored rich man who saw a sob story and decided to play hero without considering how it would feel to be on the receiving end. The words hit Christopher like physical blows. You don't know me. No, I don't. And that's exactly the problem. Zara's voice was quieter now, but no less fierce. You know intimate details about my life, about my pain, about my family. You've watched me at my most vulnerable moments. And I don't even know your last name. It's Hamilton, he said quietly. Christopher Hamilton. Zara went very still. Hamilton, as in Hamilton Industries? Christopher nodded, and he watched something shift in her expression. Not impressed, worse. Resigned. Of course, she whispered. Of course you're one of those people who thinks money fixes everything. Money can fix this, Christopher said desperately. It can save Lily's life. And what happens after that? Zara's voice was steady now, controlled. What happens when you get bored with playing savior? When the novelty of having a poor black family indebted to you wears off? It's not about debt. Everything is about debt with people like you. Zara looked at him with something that might have been pity. You think you're being generous, but what you're really doing is buying power. Power over our choices, our future, our lives. Christopher felt like he was drowning. I just wanted to help. No, you wanted to feel good about yourself. There's a difference. The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Rodriguez cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps we should all take a step back, he suggested. Mrs. Williams, Lily's condition is deteriorating. Whatever your feelings about Mr. Hamilton's methods, this treatment could save her life. Zara closed her eyes, and Christopher could see the war playing out across her features. Love for Lily battling against pride, desperation wrestling with dignity. When she opened her eyes again, they were filled with tears. Dr. Rodriguez, she said quietly, how long do we have to make this decision? Ideally, we'd want to start treatment tomorrow. But I could give you until morning. Zara nodded. I need to think. She turned to leave, then stopped and looked back at Christopher one more time. Mr. Hamilton, she said softly, I don't know what you thought you'd accomplish by following me, by inserting yourself into the worst moments of my life. But you need to understand something, my family is not your redemption story. Then she was gone, leaving Christopher standing in the hospital hallway with a $250,000 check that might as well have been worthless paper. Because he was beginning to realize that Zara Williams was right. And that made everything infinitely more complicated. What do you think Zara should do? Accept the money to save Lily, or stand on principle? And what would you do if you were in Christopher's shoes? Share your thoughts below. This moral dilemma is about to get even more complex. Hashtag Act 4, when fate forces their hands. The forced proximity that changes everything. At 2:47 a.m., Christopher Hamilton was wide awake in his penthouse, staring at the city lights through floor-to-ceiling windows that cost more than most people's houses. The cashier's check sat on his mahogany desk like an accusation, untouched since he brought it home from the hospital. My family is not your redemption story. Zara's words had been playing on repeat in his head for 6 hours. He'd tried drowning them out with expensive whiskey, with work emails, with anything that might quiet the voice telling him she was absolutely right. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Christopher Hamilton. Mr. Hamilton? The voice was shaky, unfamiliar. This is Nurse Patricia from St. Mary's Children's Hospital. I'm calling about Lily Williams. Christopher's blood turned to ice. What's wrong? She took a turn for the worse around midnight. We've moved her to intensive care. Dr. Rodriguez tried calling Mrs. Williams, but her phone goes straight to voicemail. We found your business card in her file from earlier today, and we thought. I'll be right there. Christopher was in his Mercedes and speeding through empty downtown streets within 5 minutes, still wearing the expensive suit he hadn't bothered to change out of. The hospital at night was a different creature entirely, quieter, more urgent, filled with a kind of desperate energy that only comes when time is running out. He found the ICU waiting room empty except for one figure hunched in a plastic chair, still wearing a diner uniform. Zara. She looked up when his footsteps echoed in the corridor, her eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. For a moment, neither spoke. They couldn't reach you, Christopher said quietly. My phone died during my shift. Her voice was hoarse. I came as soon as I got off work and saw the messages. How is she? Zara's composure cracked slightly. Bad. Really bad. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. The infection spread faster than they expected. Dr. Rodriguez says without the treatment. She couldn't finish the sentence. Christopher sat down in the chair across from her, maintaining careful distance. Zara. Don't. She held up a hand. Whatever you're about to say, just don't. You don't even know what. You're going to offer the money again. You're going to tell me that Lily's life is more important than my pride, that I'm being stubborn, that I should swallow my principles and let you save the day. She looked at him with eyes that held too much pain for someone her age. Am I wrong? Christopher opened his mouth, then closed it. Because she wasn't wrong. The thing is, Zara continued, her voice getting stronger, you think this is about pride. But it's not. Then what is it about? It's about what happens after. She leaned forward, fixing him with a stare that made his chest tighten. Let's say I take your money. Let's say Lily gets better. What then? Do you disappear back to your mansion and feel good about your charity work? Or do you stick around, expecting gratitude, expecting updates, expecting to be part of our lives because you bought your way in? Christopher felt heat rise in his cheeks because he didn't have an answer. He hadn't thought past saving Lily. And what about Lily? Zara pressed on. What happens when she's old enough to understand that a stranger paid for her life? That her mama couldn't afford to save her without help from some rich man who followed us around like we were a documentary he was watching? She'll be alive to ask those questions, Christopher said quietly. Will she? Or will she spend her whole life feeling like she owes something to someone she doesn't even know? Like her very existence is a debt that can never be repaid. Before Christopher could respond, Dr. Rodriguez appeared in the waiting room doorway. His expression was grim. Mrs. Williams, Mr. Hamilton. I need to speak with you both. They followed him into a small consultation room that smelled like disinfectant and difficult conversations. Lily's condition has deteriorated significantly, Dr. Rodriguez said without preamble. The infection has spread to her bloodstream. We're looking at sepsis, which means... How long? Zara interrupted, her voice barely a whisper. Without intervention? Days. Maybe less. The silence that followed was crushing. The treatment protocol we discussed, Dr. Rodriguez continued, it's no longer optional. It's the only option. And we need to start immediately. Christopher watched Zara's face crumble, watched her hands shake as she processed what the doctor was saying. "I need a minute," she whispered. "Mrs. Williams, I understand this is difficult, but we don't have." "I said I need a minute." The words came out as a sob, and Zara bolted from the room. Christopher found her in the hospital chapel, a small non-denominational space with generic stained glass and uncomfortable pews. She was sitting in the front row, her shoulders shaking with silent tears. "Zara." She called me Mama. Zara's voice was muffled by her hands. "When Marcus was dying, when he knew he wasn't going to make it through the cancer, he made me promise to take care of her. His daughter from his first marriage. The mother died when Lily was 3, and Marcus was all she had left." Christopher sat down in the pew behind her, close enough to hear but far enough away to give her space. "I promised him," Zara continued. "I looked that man in the eyes as he was dying, and I promised him I'd never let anything happen to his little girl. That I'd be her mama in every way that mattered." "You are her mama," Christopher said softly. "Am I?" Zara turned to look at him, and the anguish in her eyes made his chest ache. Because a real mama would be able to afford to save her child. A real mama wouldn't have to choose between pride and her daughter's life. "A real mama would do anything to save her child," Christopher said. "Even if it meant accepting help from someone she doesn't trust." Zara laughed bitterly. "Help? Is that what you call following someone to their most private moments? Eavesdropping on conversations about dead children and desperate phone calls? I call it being in the right place at the right time with the ability to make a difference." "Right place." Zara stood up, her exhaustion replaced by a flash of anger. "You were stalking me, Christopher. Let's call it what it was." Christopher stopped, because she was right. "I was curious about you." "Curious?" "You were different from anyone I'd ever seen." He ran a hand through his hair, struggling to find words for something he barely understood himself. "I've spent my whole life around people who want something from me. Money, connections, status. But you were just real. Your pain was real. Your love for that little girl was real. And I couldn't look away. So you decided to make us your pet project?" "I decided to help. Without asking. Without permission. Without considering how it would feel to be watched and judged and reduced to a charity case." Zara's voice was rising again. "Do you have any idea what it's like to discover that your most private moments have been observed by a stranger? That someone has been making decisions about your life without your knowledge or consent?" Christopher felt something snap inside him. "Do you have any idea what it's like to have the power to save a child's life and be told it's somehow wrong to use it?" "Yes." Zara shouted. "Because that's exactly what's happening to me right now. I have the power to save Lily's life by swallowing my pride and taking money from someone who violated my privacy, and everyone is telling me I'm wrong for hesitating." The chapel fell silent except for the sound of their heavy breathing. "This isn't about the money," Zara said finally, her voice breaking. "This is about the fact that you took away my agency. My choice. My right to fight for my own child without being watched like some kind of entertainment." Christopher felt the truth of her words hit him like a physical blow. "I never meant." "It doesn't matter what you meant." Zara wiped her eyes. "What matters is what you did. And now we're both trapped in this impossible situation where accepting your help feels like betraying everything I believe in, and refusing it means letting Lily die." That's when the chapel doors opened, and Nurse Patricia rushed in. "Mrs. Williams, Mr. Hamilton, you need to come now. Lily's asking for you both." Christopher's blood froze. "Both?" "She knows you've been here," the nurse said quickly as they hurried back toward the ICU. "She saw you through the window earlier, and she's been asking who the tall man was. Dr. Rodriguez thought, given the situation, maybe it would help if she met you." As they approached Lily's room, Christopher could see the little girl through the window, looking impossibly small among the machines and tubes that were keeping her alive. But her eyes were alert, curious, fixed on the doorway where they stood. "I can't," Christopher whispered. "She doesn't know me. This is wrong." "Mr. Hamilton," Nurse Patricia said gently, "that little girl is scared. She's asking questions, and we think having you both here might give her some comfort." Christopher looked at Zara, who was staring through the window at Lily with an expression of pure heartbreak. "It's your choice," she said quietly. But if you go in there, if you let her get attached to you, you better be prepared to see this through. Because she's already lost too many people. Christopher realized that everything, the money, the treatment, the future, hinged on this moment. On whether he was ready to stop being a distant observer and become an actual part of their story. The question was he brave enough to step through that door and face the consequences of everything he'd set in motion? Christopher's hand trembled on the door handle to Lily's room. Through the glass, he could see her watching him with those impossibly bright eyes. Marcus's eyes, he realized now, filled with a kind of innocent curiosity that only children possessed. Mama Zara, Lily's weak voice carried through the slightly open door. Is that the angel man? Zara's breath caught. Angel man. The tall man who's been praying for me. I saw him through the window yesterday, and Nurse Patricia said he's been here every night. Lily's small hand reached toward the door. Daddy Marcus used to tell me that when little girls get really sick, God sends angel people to help. Is he mine? Christopher felt his chest cave in. Every night? He hadn't been here every night. But apparently, someone had told Lily he had been. Dr. Rodriguez appeared beside them, overhearing the conversation. She's been asking about you since yesterday, he said quietly to Christopher. The night nurses mentioned seeing you in the hallway during shift changes. She's created quite a story about who you are. I can't, Christopher whispered. I'll disappoint her. I'll say the wrong thing. Mr. Hamilton, Zara said softly, and when he looked at her, he saw something different in her eyes. Not anger anymore, but a kind of desperate hope. She thinks you're here because you care about her. Maybe that's not entirely wrong. Before Christopher could respond, Lily's voice grew stronger. Mama Zara, can the angel man come in? I want to thank him for the flowers. Flowers? Christopher hadn't brought any flowers. Nurse Patricia smiled sadly. She thinks the flowers at her father's grave are from you. Mrs. Williams mentioned that someone had been leaving fresh flowers there, and Lily put two and two together. Christopher's heart stopped. You've been leaving flowers at Marcus's grave. Zara's cheeks flushed. Someone kept putting fresh flowers there. White roses. I thought maybe it was a relative I hadn't met, someone from his first marriage. But when they kept appearing every week. She looked at him with confusion. Was that you? No, Christopher said quietly. But I know who it was. Before he could explain, Lily called out again, her voice weaker now. Please? I'm scared the angels might leave if I don't say thank you. Christopher looked at Zara one more time. She nodded slowly. Together, they walked into the room. Up close, Lily was even tinier than she'd appeared through the window. The colorful headscarf couldn't hide how thin her face had become, but her smile when she saw them was radiant. Hi, angel man, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm Lily. I'm 7 3/4 years old. Christopher's throat closed up completely. He stood frozen until Zara gently touched his arm. Hi, Lily, he managed. I'm Christopher. It's very nice to meet you. Christopher, she repeated, like she was testing how the name felt. That's a big name. Can I call you Chris? You can call me whatever you'd like. Lily's smile grew wider. Are you really an angel? You're very tall for an angel. And you don't have wings. Christopher found himself smiling despite everything. I'm not an angel, sweetheart. I'm just a person who heard that you needed help. But you've been praying for me, right? Mama Zara says prayer is how we talk to angels. Christopher glanced at Zara, who was watching the interaction with tears in her eyes. I have been thinking about you a lot, he said truthfully. And hoping you'd get better. That's the same thing, Lily said with the absolute certainty of childhood. Daddy Marcus taught me that. At the mention of her father, Christopher saw Zara's composure waver. Tell me about your daddy, Christopher said, settling into the chair beside Lily's bed. What was he like? Lily's eyes lit up despite her exhaustion. He was the best daddy in the whole world. He made the best pancakes, and he used to read me stories with different voices for all the characters. And when I got scared at night, he'd tell me about how love is the strongest magic in the universe. That sounds like a very smart daddy. He was. And he loved Mama Zara so much. Lily looked at Zara with pure adoration. He said she was his miracle, because she came into our lives right when we needed her most. I was only 5 when Mama Zara became my new mommy, but it felt like she'd always been there. Christopher watched Zara's face as Lily spoke, saw the way her expression softened with memory and grief. Mama Zara, Lily continued, tell Chris about how you and Daddy Marcus met. It's the most beautiful story ever. Zara hesitated, then pulled a chair close to Lily's bed. You want to hear that old story again, baby girl? Please. And Chris needs to hear it too, so he understands why you're so special. Zara looked at Christopher, and he saw her making a decision. To trust him with something precious. I met Marcus at the cemetery, she began softly. I was visiting my grandmother's grave. She raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 8. I went there every Sunday after church, just to talk to her, you know. Lily nodded solemnly, having heard this story many times. One Sunday, I noticed this man sitting by a grave not far from Grammy's. He had this little girl with him, she smiled at Lily, and she was placing flowers on the headstone and talking to it like she was having a real conversation. I was talking to my birth mommy, Lily whispered to Christopher. I don't remember her much, but Daddy said she was watching over me. The man looked so lost, Zara continued. So heartbroken. And this little girl was trying so hard to take care of him, patting his hand and telling him not to cry. It reminded me of myself at that age, trying to comfort Grammy when she'd talk about missing my parents. Christopher found himself leaning forward, drawn into the story despite himself. The next week, they were there again. And the week after that. Finally, I walked over and said hello. Zara's eyes grew soft with memory. Marcus was the gentlest man I'd ever met. His wife, Lily's birth mother, had died from complications after a surgery. He was working 3 jobs trying to keep up with the medical bills, trying to be everything to this little girl who'd lost her mommy. And I kept asking Daddy why he was so sad all the time, Lily added. But then Mama Zara started coming to the cemetery with us, and Daddy started smiling again. We'd all sit together by the graves, my grandmother's and Lily's birth mothers, and we'd talk. About loss, about hope, about how love doesn't end when people die. Zara's voice grew thick. Marcus had been carrying so much guilt about not being able to afford better medical care for his first wife. He blamed himself for her death. Christopher felt something twist in his chest. The parallels to their current situation were impossible to ignore. But Mama Zara helped him understand that love isn't about money, Lily said. It's about showing up. It's about being there when someone needs you. 6 months later, Marcus proposed to me right there in the cemetery, with Lily helping him hold the ring. Zara wiped away a tear. He said he'd never expected to love again, but that sometimes life gives you a second chance when you're not even looking for it. And then I got 2 mommies, Lily said sleepily. My birth mommy in heaven, and my Mama Zara here with me. 3 years, Zara whispered. We had 3 beautiful years as a family. Marcus adopted me legally, made me Lily's official mother. We were planning to have more children, maybe buy a little house. Then Daddy got sick, Lily said, her voice growing smaller. The cancer came fast, Zara continued. Too fast. And expensive. So expensive. She looked at Christopher with eyes full of old pain. Marcus worked himself into the ground, trying to pay for treatments. Just like his first wife, he was convinced that more money would save him. That if he could just afford the experimental treatments, the better doctors. But it wasn't about money, Lily whispered. It was about time. And we used all the time we had loving each other. Christopher felt tears he didn't know he was capable of sliding down his cheeks. Before he died, Zara said, her voice barely audible, Marcus made me promise something. He said, Zara, don't let anyone convince you that money is love. Don't let anyone make you feel small for fighting with your heart instead of your wallet. You are enough. Your love is enough. Promise me you'll remember that. The room fell silent except for the steady beep of Lily's monitors. But sometimes, Lily said in a tiny voice, love needs help, doesn't it, Mama Zara? Sometimes people who love each other need angel people to help them figure things out. Christopher looked at this impossibly wise little girl, then at Zara, who was staring at him with something that looked almost like understanding. Lily, he said carefully, what if I told you that the flowers at your daddy's grave weren't from me? Then who were they from? Christopher pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found what he was looking for. He dialed a number he hadn't called in months. Mom. Zara's eyes widened. Christopher. The voice on the other end was warm but surprised. Sweetheart, it's so late. Are you all right? Mom, I need to ask you something. Have you been putting flowers on graves at Riverside Cemetery? There was a long pause. How did you? Christopher, have you been following me? Despite everything, Christopher almost smiled. You could say that. Mom, there's someone I'd like you to meet. Someone who's been wondering who you are. Christopher, what's going on? He looked at Lily, who was watching with wide, curious eyes. Mom, do you remember telling me about the little girl and her father you used to see at the cemetery? The ones who reminded you of me after Dad died. Another pause, longer this time. Oh my God, Eleanor Hamilton whispered. The little girl with the beautiful smile. Is she? She's very sick, Mom. And she thinks the flowers you've been leaving are from angels. Through the phone, Christopher heard his mother start to cry. I'll be right there, she said. As Christopher hung up, he realized that the story was far more complicated than any of them had imagined. Because sometimes, angels come in the most unexpected forms. And sometimes, the people we think we're saving are actually the ones saving us. Eleanor Hamilton arrived at St. Mary's Children's Hospital 45 minutes later, looking nothing like what Christopher had expected his mother to look like at 3:30 in the morning. Instead of the perfectly coiffed socialite he was used to seeing at charity galas, she appeared in jeans and a soft sweater, her silver hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her eyes red from crying. She also carried a small bouquet of white roses. I stopped by the cemetery first, she explained quietly as Christopher met her in the hallway. I wanted to leave fresh flowers for Marcus before coming here. It felt appropriate. Christopher stared at his mother, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years. How long have you been visiting his grave? Every week since his funeral. Eleanor's voice was soft. I used to see him there with Lily when I visited your father's grave. They always looked so complete. Even in their sadness, they had each other. It reminded me of you and your father when you were small. Christopher felt something shift in his chest. I never knew you still visited Dad's grave. Every Tuesday. For 15 years. Eleanor touched his arm gently. There's a lot we don't talk about, sweetheart. But that doesn't mean we don't feel it. Before Christopher could respond, Lily's voice drifted from her room. Mama Zara, is that the flower lady? The one who makes Daddy's grave so pretty? Eleanor's breath caught. She knows. She's very observant, Christopher said. And very sick. Mom, I need you to know, this isn't a simple situation. Lily needs treatment that costs more money than Zara has. I offered to pay for it, but Zara doesn't trust your motives. Eleanor's voice held no judgment, only understanding. I imagine she feels like you're trying to buy your way into their lives. Christopher stared at his mother. How did you? Because that's exactly what your father would have done. What he did do, when you were diagnosed with leukemia at 6 years old. Eleanor's eyes grew distant. He threw money at every specialist, every treatment, every possible solution. He nearly bankrupted us trying to save you, and he never once asked what you needed emotionally. Just what he could buy to fix the problem. I don't remember being that sick. Because the treatment worked. And because I made sure you felt loved and safe throughout the entire process, not like a medical emergency that needed to be solved. Eleanor looked toward Lily's room. That little girl doesn't need a benefactor, Christopher. She needs people who will love her regardless of whether she lives or dies. The words hit Christopher like a physical blow. That's a terrible thing to say. It's an honest thing to say. Love that's conditional on survival isn't love, it's investment. Eleanor's voice was gentle but firm. If you're going to be part of their lives, it has to be because you care about them as people, not because you want to be their savior. Before Christopher could process that fully, Zara appeared in the doorway, her eyes widening as she saw Eleanor. You, she whispered. I've seen you before. At the cemetery. Eleanor nodded. I'm Eleanor Hamilton. Christopher's mother. And you're Zara, the young woman who loved my Tuesday cemetery friend. Tuesday cemetery friend? Marcus, Eleanor said softly. I used to see him there with Lily every week when I visited my late husband's grave. After he died, I couldn't stop thinking about that little girl. So I started leaving flowers. I hoped somehow she'd know that someone was thinking of her daddy, thinking of her. Zara's composure cracked. That was you? All those beautiful arrangements. I have a flower garden. Had too many blooms and not enough graves to put them on, Eleanor said with a small smile. It seemed like Marcus's grave could use some extra love. Mama Zara. Lily's voice called from inside the room. Is that the flower lady? I want to meet her. Eleanor looked at Christopher, then at Zara. May I? Zara nodded, and together the three of them entered Lily's room. If Christopher had thought Lily's reaction to meeting him was sweet, her reaction to Eleanor was pure magic. You're her. Lily's tired face lit up with joy. You're the flower lady who's been taking care of Daddy's grave. Eleanor moved to Lily's bedside with the natural grace of someone who'd spent years comforting a sick child. Hello, beautiful girl. I'm Eleanor. And yes, I've been leaving flowers for your daddy. Why? Lily asked with the direct curiosity of childhood. Eleanor sat down in the chair beside the bed, her movements careful and gentle. Because when I saw him at the cemetery with you, he reminded me of my own son when he was sick and scared. And when your daddy went to heaven, I thought maybe you and your mama might like to know that someone was still thinking of him. What was wrong with your son? Lily asked. Christopher felt his mother's eyes find his across the room. He had leukemia, like you have now. He was very sick for a long time. But he got better? He did. He grew up to be a very tall, very stubborn man who sometimes doesn't know how to ask for help when he needs it. Lily giggled weakly. Is that Chris? That's Chris, Eleanor confirmed with a smile. Did you take care of him when he was sick? I did. Every single day. I read him stories, and sang him songs, and held his hand during the scary parts. Eleanor's voice grew soft. Just like your mama Zara takes care of you. Lily looked thoughtfully between Eleanor, Christopher, and Zara. So you understand about being scared? I understand about being scared, Eleanor confirmed. And I understand about loving someone so much that you do anything to make them feel better. Even if you don't have enough money? Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. Especially if you don't have enough money. Because that's when love has to be the strongest. Christopher watched this interaction with something approaching awe. His mother, the woman he'd always seen as distant and formal, was connecting with Lily in a way that felt natural and genuine. Not performative, not calculated, just real. Mrs. Eleanor, Lily said thoughtfully, do you think my daddy knows about the flowers? I think your daddy knows about every single person who loves you, Eleanor said. And I think he's very happy that you have so many people watching over you. Like Mama Zara and Chris and you? Exactly like that. Lily was quiet for a moment, then looked at Christopher. Chris, why do you look sad? Christopher realized he'd been crying without knowing it. I'm not sad, sweetheart. I'm grateful. For what? For meeting you. For meeting your mama. For understanding some things I didn't understand before. What things? Christopher glanced at Zara, who was watching him with an expression he couldn't read. I understand now that trying to fix someone's problems isn't the same as caring about them, he said slowly. And I understand that sometimes the best way to help is just to show up. To be there. Like Mrs. Eleanor with the flowers? Exactly like Mrs. Eleanor with the flowers. Lily smiled, then looked at Zara. Mama Zara, are you still mad at Chris? Zara was quiet for a long moment. I'm not mad anymore, baby girl. I'm just confused. About what? About whether people can really care about strangers, or if there's always something they want in return. Eleanor spoke up gently. Zara, may I tell you something about my son? Zara nodded. Christopher has spent his entire adult life trying to earn love through achievement. Through success, through money, through being useful to people. Eleanor's voice was sad but proud. His father was the same way. They both believed that love had to be purchased, earned, justified. "Mom," Christopher said quietly. "It's true, sweetheart." Eleanor looked at him with infinite tenderness. "When you got sick as a child, your father threw money at the problem because he didn't know how else to show love. And when you recovered, you learned that lesson too well." She turned back to Zara. "What I think happened is that Christopher saw you and Lily loving each other so purely, so completely, without any conditions or expectations. And for the first time in his life, he wanted to be part of something real." "But he went about it all wrong," Zara said. "Completely wrong," Eleanor agreed. "Following you was invasive and inappropriate. Trying to solve your problems without asking was presumptuous and controlling." "Mom," Christopher protested. "But," Eleanor continued, "his heart was in the right place. He just doesn't know how to love people without trying to fix them first." Lily had been listening to this entire conversation with the intense focus that children bring to adult discussions they sense are important. "Mrs. Eleanor," she said finally, "do you think Chris wants to be part of our family?" The question hung in the air like a held breath. Christopher looked at this little girl who was fighting for her life, at Zara who was fighting to save her, at his mother who had been quietly caring for strangers without expecting anything in return. "I think," he said slowly, "I'd like to learn how." "How to what?" Lily asked. "How to be part of a family that loves each other just because. Not because of what anyone can do for anyone else, not because of money or problems that need solving. Just because." Lily smiled, the most beautiful smile Christopher had ever seen. "That's easy," she said. "You just have to decide to stay. Even when it's scary. Even when you don't know what to do. You just stay." Eleanor reached over and took Lily's small hand. "You are a very wise little girl. Daddy Marcus taught me that. He said love isn't complicated. People just make it complicated because they're scared." "Scared of what?" Christopher asked. "Scared that they're not good enough just the way they are." Christopher felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been locked tight for so long he'd forgotten it was there. "Lily," he said softly, "what if I promise to learn how to love your family the right way? What if I promise to show up not because I want to fix things, but because I want to be there for whatever happens? Even if I don't get better?" The question nearly destroyed him. "Even if you don't get better? And even if Mama Zara stays mad at you sometimes?" Christopher looked at Zara, who was crying now. "Even if Mama Zara stays mad at me sometimes?" "Okay," Lily said simply. "Then you can be part of our family. But you have to promise one more thing." "What's that?" "You have to let us be part of your family too. Because families share everything. The good stuff and the scary stuff." Christopher looked at his mother, who was nodding through her tears. "I promise," he whispered. And for the first time in his life, Christopher Hamilton understood what it meant to love someone unconditionally. Even as the machines around them continued their steady rhythm, marking time in a race they might not win. The alarm started screaming at 6:42 a.m. Christopher jolted awake in the uncomfortable hospital chair where he'd spent the night, his neck stiff from sleeping at an awkward angle. Across the room, Zara was already on her feet, her eyes wide with terror as medical staff rushed into Lily's room. "What's happening?" Eleanor's voice was sharp with panic. She'd insisted on staying too, curled up in the chair by the window with a hospital blanket. "Her oxygen levels are dropping," Dr. Rodriguez's voice cut through the chaos as nurses moved around Lily's bed with practiced urgency. "We need to intubate. Now." Christopher watched in horror as they prepared to put a breathing tube down Lily's throat. The little girl who had been talking and laughing just hours before was now unconscious, her small chest rising and falling rapidly as her body fought for air. "Is she going to be okay?" Zara's voice cracked as she pressed herself against the wall, giving the medical team room to work. Dr. Rodriguez didn't answer immediately, focused on the procedure. When the tube was finally in place and connected to the ventilator, he turned to face them with an expression that made Christopher's blood run cold. "Her body is shutting down," he said quietly. "The infection has spread faster than we anticipated. Without the specialized treatment protocol, we're looking at hours, maybe less." The words hit the room like physical blows. "Hours." Eleanor whispered. "The treatment," Christopher said desperately, pulling out his phone. "The money is still available. We can start it right now." Mr. Hamilton, Dr. Rodriguez's voice was gentle but firm. At this point, even with the treatment, her chances are less than 30%. And that's if we start within the next 2 hours. Then let's start it. Christopher turned to Zara. Please. I know you have every right to hate me, but don't let that stop you from saving her life. Zara stared at Lily's unconscious form, tears streaming down her face. It's not about hating you anymore. Then what? It's about what she would want. Zara's voice was barely a whisper. What Marcus would want. What's right? What's right is keeping her alive. What's right, Eleanor said softly, is letting Zara decide what's best for her daughter. Christopher felt like he was drowning. Mom, she's dying. Right now in front of us she's dying, and we have the power to save her. Do we? Eleanor moved closer to Lily's bedside, her hand hovering over the little girl's forehead. Or do we have the power to extend her suffering? The question hung in the air like a curse. Dr. Rodriguez cleared his throat. There's something else you need to know. Even if the treatment works, Lily would need ongoing care for months, possibly years. The recovery process is brutal. More surgeries, more hospital stays, constant monitoring. And there's no guarantee she'd ever have a normal life. But she'd be alive, Christopher said desperately. Would she be living? Zara asked, and the pain in her voice was unbearable. Or would she be existing in hospitals and doctors' offices, fighting battles that might never end? Christopher felt panic rising in his chest. You can't just give up on her. I'm not giving up. Zara moved to Lily's bedside, taking the little girl's hand in both of hers. I'm trying to figure out what love looks like in this moment. Love looks like fighting. Sometimes, Eleanor said quietly, love looks like letting go. Christopher whirled on his mother. How can you say that? You fought for me when I was sick. You threw everything you had at keeping me alive. Yes, I did. And I was lucky, you recovered. But Christopher, there were moments during your treatment when I wondered if I was fighting for you or fighting for me. If I was trying to save your life or save myself from the pain of losing you. Christopher felt tears burning his eyes. What's wrong with that? Nothing's wrong with wanting to save someone you love. But there's a difference between fighting for someone and fighting against their peace. Before Christopher could respond, a small sound came from Lily's bed. A soft beep from one of the machines that hadn't been there before. Dr. Rodriguez moved quickly to check the monitors. Her heart rate is becoming irregular. What does that mean? Zara asked. It means we're running out of time to make a decision. The room fell silent except for the mechanical sounds of the ventilator and the increasingly erratic beeping of Lily's heart monitor. That's when something extraordinary happened. Lily's eyes fluttered open. Lily. Zara leaned forward, her voice filled with desperate hope. Baby girl, can you hear me? Lily couldn't speak around the breathing tube, but her eyes were alert, searching the faces around her bed. When her gaze found Christopher, she blinked slowly, once, twice, like she was trying to communicate something. She wants to tell us something, Eleanor said softly. Dr. Rodriguez shook his head. She can't speak with the tube in place. But she's trying, Zara insisted. Look at her eyes. Christopher moved closer to the bed, studying Lily's face. Her eyes were moving between him, Zara, and Eleanor, then back to Christopher. She blinked again, more deliberately this time. It's okay, sweetheart, Christopher whispered. We're all here. We're not going anywhere. Lily's hand, the one not connected to N4, moved slightly on the blanket. Zara noticed first. She's trying to point at something. They followed her gaze to the bedside table, where Eleanor's latest bouquet of white roses sat in a small vase. The flowers? Eleanor asked. Lily blinked once, strongly. She wants the flowers, Zara realized. She wants to smell them. With infinite gentleness, Eleanor lifted the vase and held it close to Lily's face. Even with the breathing tube, they could see her trying to inhale, to catch the scent of the roses that had become such a symbol of love and remembrance in her life. When Eleanor pulled the flowers back, Lily's eyes found Christopher's again. This time, there was something different in them. Something that looked almost like forgiveness. I think, Zara said slowly, she's trying to tell us something about love. What do you mean? Christopher asked. The flowers. Your mother's been leaving them out of love, not because she expected anything in return. Not because she was trying to fix anything or change anything. Just because she cared. Christopher felt understanding dawn like a painful sunrise. And the treatment money, he whispered. If you give it, Zara said, her voice steady despite her tears, it has to be like the flowers. Because you care, not because you want to be her savior. Not because you need to prove something or fix something. Just because you love her. Christopher looked at this little girl who had taught him more about love in 2 days than he'd learned in 38 years of life. Lily, he said softly, I do love you. I love your mama. I love your fierce spirit and your wise heart and the way you see angels in ordinary people. Lily's eyes filled with tears that couldn't fall because of the tube. And if we do this treatment, I promise it won't be about me. It won't be about what I need or what I want to prove. It will be about giving you the best chance to live the life you're meant to live, whatever that looks like. Christopher turned to Zara. But it has to be your choice. Your decision as her mother. And whatever you decide, I'll respect it. I'll support it. And I'll stay, just like I promised. Zara looked at Lily, whose eyes were now moving between her and Christopher with something that looked like peace. Dr. Rodriguez, Zara said finally, if we start the treatment, what are her real chances? Not the optimistic version, not the worst-case scenario. The truth. Dr. Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. 30% chance of survival. If she survives, 60% chance of significant long-term health issues. If she survives and recovers fully, she could live a completely normal life. And if we don't start treatment, she'll be comfortable. No pain. She could go peacefully, surrounded by everyone who loves her. Zara closed her eyes, and Christopher could see her having a conversation with someone who wasn't in the room. With Marcus, maybe. Or with God. Or with her own heart. When she opened her eyes again, they were filled with a kind of clarity that took Christopher's breath away. We fight, she said simply. But we fight together. As a family. And if we lose. She looked at Christopher, then at Eleanor. We lose together too. Christopher felt something break open in his chest, not with pain this time, but with a kind of love he'd never experienced before. Together, he agreed. Together, Eleanor echoed. And as Dr. Rodriguez began making phone calls to start Lily's treatment, Christopher realized that they'd already won something more important than the battle they were about to fight. They'd found each other. But the hardest part was just beginning. The specialized treatment began at 7:30 a.m. on what Dr. Rodriguez warned them would be the longest day of their lives. Christopher had never understood the phrase emotional marathon until he found himself running it. Hour after hour he, Zara, and Eleanor took shifts sitting by Lily's bedside, watching machines pump life-saving medicine into her tiny body while other machines monitored every heartbeat, every breath, every sign that she was still fighting. By noon, Lily's fever had spiked to 104 degrees. This is normal, Dr. Rodriguez assured them as nurses packed ice around her small body. Her immune system is responding to the treatment. It's actually a good sign. But nothing about watching a 7-year-old girl burn with fever felt good to Christopher. He found himself pacing the hallway like a caged animal, his expensive suit wrinkled from sleeping in hospital chairs, his hair disheveled from running his hands through it every time the monitors beeped an alarm. Christopher. Eleanor's voice was calm, but when he looked at her, he could see the fear she was trying to hide. Come sit down. You're making the nurses nervous. I can't sit still. Christopher's voice was raw from hours of whispered prayers and conversations. What if we're torturing her? What if we made the wrong choice? Then we made it together, Zara said from her position beside Lily's bed. She hadn't left that chair in 6 hours, hadn't eaten, hadn't slept. Her hand remained wrapped around Lily's, as if she could anchor the little girl to life through sheer determination. How are you so calm? Christopher asked. I'm not calm. Zara's voice was steady, but Christopher could see her hands shaking. I'm terrified. But Lily needs me to be strong right now, so that's what I'm going to be. At 2:17 p.m., Lily's heart stopped. The alarm was different this time, sharper, more urgent. Dr. Rodriguez and a team of specialists rushed in with a crash cart while Christopher, Zara, and Eleanor were pushed back against the wall. Clear. Dr. Rodriguez's voice cut through the chaos as he charged the defibrillator. Christopher watched in horror as Lily's small body jumped from the electrical shock, once, twice, 3 times. Each jolt sent a corresponding shock through his own chest, and he found himself bargaining with a god he wasn't sure he believed in. Please. Not her. Not this little girl who's taught me what love really means. Take anything else, but not her. We've got a rhythm, one of the nurses called out, and Christopher felt his knees nearly buckle with relief. But the celebration was short-lived. Her blood pressure is dropping, Dr. Rodriguez said grimly. She's going into shock. The next 3 hours were a blur of medical terminology Christopher didn't understand, machines he'd never seen before, and conversations between doctors that seemed to happen in a language designed specifically to exclude the people who loved the patient most. Eleanor had taken to praying quietly in the corner, her lips moving silently as she worked through what Christopher suspected was every prayer she'd ever learned. Zara hadn't spoken in over an hour, her entire being focused on holding Lily's hand and whispering things that were too private for anyone else to hear. Christopher found himself thinking about flowers. About his mother spending every Tuesday for 15 years visiting his father's grave, leaving fresh blooms not because anyone expected it, not because it served any purpose other than love. About her expanding that ritual to include Marcus's grave, because she'd recognized something beautiful in the way he'd loved his daughter. About love that didn't need to be useful or productive or even hopeful. Love that just was. At 5:43 p.m., everything changed. Lily's eyes opened. Not the brief, clouded consciousness they'd seen earlier, but clear, alert awareness. She looked around the room, taking in the machines, the worried faces, the evidence of the battle that had been fought for her life. When her gaze found Zara, she squeezed her hand. Baby girl. Zara's voice was barely a whisper. Are you with us? Lily blinked once, deliberately. Dr. Rodriguez moved quickly to check her responses, shining a light in her eyes, testing her reflexes, reading the monitors that had been screaming warnings just hours before. This is remarkable, he said finally. Her vitals are stabilizing. The infection markers are dropping. I've never seen a response this dramatic this quickly. What does that mean? Christopher asked, afraid to hope. It means she's fighting back. Hard. Dr. Rodriguez smiled for the first time in days. It means the treatment is working. Christopher felt something inside him collapse, not with despair, but with relief so profound it left him shaking. He slumped against the wall, his legs unable to hold him up anymore. We can remove the breathing tube in a few hours if she continues to improve, Dr. Rodriguez continued. She's not out of the woods yet, but this is very, very good. Eleanor was crying openly now, her hands pressed to her mouth as if she could hold in years of accumulated worry and fear. Zara was talking to Lily in rapid, soft whispers, telling her how proud she was, how much she loved her, how Marcus would be so happy to know she was fighting so hard. But it was Lily's response that broke Christopher's heart wide open. The little girl's eyes found his across the room, and she mouthed a single word around the breathing tube, Chris. He moved to her bedside without conscious thought, taking her other hand in both of his. I'm here. Lily's eyes moved to Eleanor, then back to him. She squeezed his hand 3 times, a pattern he recognized. I love you too, he whispered, understanding immediately. Then Lily did something that would stay with Christopher for the rest of his life. She brought their joined hands up to rest against her chest, right over her heart. The message was clear, you're part of this now. Part of me. Part of us. Dr. Rodriguez, Zara said softly, when can we know for sure? When will we know if she's really going to make it? The next 24 hours will tell us everything we need to know about her long-term prognosis, he replied. But I'll be honest with you, I haven't seen a turnaround like this in 20 years of pediatric oncology. As the evening wore on and Lily's condition continued to stabilize, Christopher found himself stepping outside for the first time in almost 15 hours. The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that reminded him of hope. His phone had been buzzing all day with calls from his office, from board meetings he was missing, from business emergencies that had seemed important yesterday but felt meaningless now. Instead of checking those messages, he called his assistant. Margaret? It's Christopher. Mr. Hamilton. Thank God. The board has been trying to reach you all day. The Morrison deal is falling apart, and... Cancel everything for the next month, Christopher said quietly. Sir? Cancel everything? But the quarterly projections, and the investor meeting. Cancel everything. Christopher looked back through the hospital windows at the little girl who was still fighting for her life, at the woman who'd taught him what courage looked like, at his mother who'd been quietly loving strangers for years. There are more important things than quarterly projections. Mr. Hamilton, I don't understand. Are you all right? Christopher smiled, the first genuine smile he'd felt in months. I'm better than all right, Margaret. I'm exactly where I need to be. When he returned to Lily's room, he found Zara and Eleanor talking quietly in the corner while Lily dozed peacefully. The breathing tube was gone, removed an hour earlier, and she was breathing on her own. How is she? He asked. Strong, Zara said simply. Stronger than any of us imagined. Like her mama, Eleanor added with a smile. Christopher looked at these two women who had become his family in the space of 3 days, at the little girl who had taught him that love wasn't about what you could buy or fix or control. Zara, he said quietly, I need to tell you something. She looked up at him, her expression cautious. When this is all over, when Lily is well and strong again, I don't want to go back to the way things were before. I don't want to be the man who followed you through cemeteries and thought money could solve everything. What do you want to be? Christopher looked at Lily, sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. I want to be the man who shows up to her school plays and helps with homework and teaches her how to drive when she's 16. I want to be the man who takes her to visit her daddy's grave and tells her stories about how brave her mama was during the scariest time of their lives. Zara's eyes filled with tears. Christopher. I want to be part of this family not because I saved anyone, but because we saved each other. He looked at Eleanor, then back at Zara. If you'll have me. If you'll let me learn how to love you the right way. Before Zara could answer, a small voice interrupted them. Does that mean Chris gets to stay forever? They turned to see Lily watching them with clear, bright eyes, a small smile on her face. How long have you been awake? Zara asked, moving quickly to her bedside. Long enough to hear the important parts, Lily said, her voice hoarse but strong. So does he get to stay? Zara looked at Christopher for a long moment, and he could see her making the same choice she'd made in the chapel, to trust, to hope, to believe in the possibility of love that didn't need to be earned. What do you think, baby girl? She asked. Should we let Chris be part of our family? Lily's smile was radiant. I think Daddy Marcus would like him. And I think our family is supposed to have a daddy in it. Christopher felt tears streaming down his face as the little girl who had fought death and won reached for his hand. Welcome home, Daddy Chris, she whispered. And Christopher Hamilton, who had spent his entire life trying to buy love, finally understood what it meant to receive it freely. The specialized treatment began at 7:30 a.m. on what Dr. Rodriguez warned them would be the longest day of their lives. Christopher had never understood the phrase emotional marathon until he found himself running it. Hour after hour he, Zara, and Eleanor took shifts sitting by Lily's bedside, watching machines pump life-saving medicine into her tiny body while other machines monitored every heartbeat, every breath, every sign that she was still fighting. By noon, Lily's fever had spiked to 104 degrees. This is normal, Dr. Rodriguez assured them as nurses packed ice around her small body. Her immune system is responding to the treatment. It's actually a good sign. But nothing about watching a 7-year-old girl burn with fever felt good to Christopher. He found himself pacing the hallway like a caged animal, his expensive suit wrinkled from sleeping in hospital chairs, his hair disheveled from running his hands through it every time the monitors beeped an alarm. Christopher. Eleanor's voice was calm, but when he looked at her, he could see the fear she was trying to hide. Come sit down. You're making the nurses nervous. I can't sit still. Christopher's voice was raw from hours of whispered prayers and conversations. What if we're torturing her? What if we made the wrong choice? Then we made it together, Zara said from her position beside Lily's bed. She hadn't left that chair in 6 hours, hadn't eaten, hadn't slept. Her hand remained wrapped around Lily's, as if she could anchor the little girl to life through sheer determination. How are you so calm? Christopher asked. I'm not calm. Zara's voice was steady, but Christopher could see her hands shaking. I'm terrified. But Lily needs me to be strong right now, so that's what I'm going to be. At 2:17 p.m., Lily's heart stopped. The alarm was different this time, sharper, more urgent. Dr. Rodriguez and a team of specialists rushed in with a crash cart while Christopher, Zara, and Eleanor were pushed back against the wall. Clear. Dr. Rodriguez's voice cut through the chaos as he charged the defibrillator. Christopher watched in horror as Lily's small body jumped from the electrical shock, once, twice, 3 times. Each jolt sent a corresponding shock through his own chest, and he found himself bargaining with a god he wasn't sure he believed in. Please. Not her. Not this little girl who's taught me what love really means. Take anything else, but not her. We've got a rhythm, one of the nurses called out, and Christopher felt his knees nearly buckle with relief. But the celebration was short-lived. Her blood pressure is dropping, Dr. Rodriguez said grimly. She's going into shock. The next 3 hours were a blur of medical terminology Christopher didn't understand, machines he'd never seen before, and conversations between doctors that seemed to happen in a language designed specifically to exclude the people who loved the patient most. Eleanor had taken to praying quietly in the corner, her lips moving silently as she worked through what Christopher suspected was every prayer she'd ever learned. Zara hadn't spoken in over an hour, her entire being focused on holding Lily's hand and whispering things that were too private for anyone else to hear. Christopher found himself thinking about flowers. About his mother spending every Tuesday for 15 years visiting his father's grave, leaving fresh blooms not because anyone expected it, not because it served any purpose other than love. About her expanding that ritual to include Marcus's grave, because she'd recognized something beautiful in the way he'd loved his daughter. About love that didn't need to be useful or productive or even hopeful. Love that just was. At 5:43 p.m., everything changed. Lily's eyes opened. Not the brief, clouded consciousness they'd seen earlier, but clear, alert awareness. She looked around the room, taking in the machines, the worried faces, the evidence of the battle that had been fought for her life. When her gaze found Zara, she squeezed her hand. Baby girl. Zara's voice was barely a whisper. Are you with us? Lily blinked once, deliberately. Dr. Rodriguez moved quickly to check her responses, shining a light in her eyes, testing her reflexes, reading the monitors that had been screaming warnings just hours before. This is remarkable, he said finally. Her vitals are stabilizing. The infection markers are dropping. I've never seen a response this dramatic this quickly. What does that mean? Christopher asked, afraid to hope. It means she's fighting back. Hard. Dr. Rodriguez smiled for the first time in days. It means the treatment is working. Christopher felt something inside him collapse, not with despair, but with relief so profound it left him shaking. He slumped against the wall, his legs unable to hold him up anymore. We can remove the breathing tube in a few hours if she continues to improve, Dr. Rodriguez continued. She's not out of the woods yet, but this is very, very good. Eleanor was crying openly now, her hands pressed to her mouth as if she could hold in years of accumulated worry and fear. Zara was talking to Lily in rapid, soft whispers, telling her how proud she was, how much she loved her, how Marcus would be so happy to know she was fighting so hard. But it was Lily's response that broke Christopher's heart wide open. The little girl's eyes found his across the room, and she mouthed a single word around the breathing tube, Chris. He moved to her bedside without conscious thought, taking her other hand in both of his. I'm here, sweetheart. We're all here. Lily's eyes moved to Eleanor, then back to him. She squeezed his hand 3 times, a pattern he recognized. I love you too, he whispered, understanding immediately. Then Lily did something that would stay with Christopher for the rest of his life. She brought their joined hands up to rest against her chest, right over her heart. The message was clear, you're part of this now. Part of me. Part of us. Dr. Rodriguez, Zara said softly, when can we know for sure? When will we know if she's really going to make it? The next 24 hours will tell us everything we need to know about her long-term prognosis, he replied. But I'll be honest with you, I haven't seen a turnaround like this in 20 years of pediatric oncology. As the evening wore on and Lily's condition continued to stabilize, Christopher found himself stepping outside for the first time in almost 15 hours. The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that reminded him of hope. His phone had been buzzing all day with calls from his office, from board meetings he was missing, from business emergencies that had seemed important yesterday but felt meaningless now. Instead of checking those messages, he called his assistant. Margaret? It's Christopher. Mr. Hamilton. Thank God. The board has been trying to reach you all day. The Morrison deal is falling apart, and cancel everything for the next month, Christopher said quietly. Sir? Cancel everything? But the quarterly projections, and the investor meeting. Cancel everything. Christopher looked back through the hospital windows at the little girl who was still fighting for her life, at the woman who'd taught him what courage looked like, at his mother who'd been quietly loving strangers for years. There are more important things than quarterly projections. Mr. Hamilton, I don't understand. Are you all right? Christopher smiled, the first genuine smile he'd felt in months. I'm better than all right, Margaret. I'm exactly where I need to be. When he returned to Lily's room, he found Zara and Eleanor talking quietly in the corner while Lily dozed peacefully. The breathing tube was gone, removed an hour earlier, and she was breathing on her own. How is she? He asked. Strong, Zara said simply. Stronger than any of us imagined. Like her mama, Eleanor added with a smile. Christopher looked at these two women who had become his family in the space of 3 days, at the little girl who had taught him that love wasn't about what you could buy or fix or control. Zara, he said quietly, I need to tell you something. She looked up at him, her expression cautious. When this is all over, when Lily is well and strong again, I don't want to go back to the way things were before. I don't want to be the man who followed you through cemeteries and thought money could solve everything. What do you want to be? Christopher looked at Lily, sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. I want to be the man who shows up to her school plays and helps with homework and teaches her how to drive when she's 16. I want to be the man who takes her to visit her daddy's grave and tells her stories about how brave her mama was during the scariest time of their lives. Zara's eyes filled with tears. Christopher. I want to be part of this family not because I saved anyone, but because we saved each other. He looked at Eleanor, then back at Zara. If you'll have me. If you'll let me learn how to love you the right way. Before Zara could answer, a small voice interrupted them. Does that mean Chris gets to stay forever? They turned to see Lily watching them with clear, bright eyes, a small smile on her face. How long have you been awake? Zara asked, moving quickly to her bedside. Long enough to hear the important parts, Lily said, her voice hoarse but strong. So does he get to stay? Zara looked at Christopher for a long moment, and he could see her making the same choice she'd made in the chapel. To trust, to hope, to believe in the possibility of love that didn't need to be earned. What do you think, baby girl? She asked. Should we let Chris be part of our family? Lily's smile was radiant. I think Daddy Marcus would like him. And I think our family is supposed to have a daddy in it. Christopher felt tears streaming down his face as the little girl who had fought death and won reached for his hand. Welcome home, Daddy Chris, she whispered. And Christopher Hamilton, who had spent his entire life trying to buy love, finally understood what it meant to receive it freely. 6 months later. The spring air was warm and fragrant with cherry blossoms as Christopher pushed Lily's wheelchair through Riverside Cemetery, Eleanor and Zara walking beside them carrying armfuls of flowers from Eleanor's garden. Lily was still recovering her strength after months of treatment, but her eyes were bright, her laughter was frequent, and her hair was growing back in soft curls under her favorite purple headband. Are you sure you're not too tired for this, baby girl? Zara asked, adjusting the blanket across Lily's lap. I've been waiting for this for months, Mama, Lily said firmly. I need to tell Daddy Marcus about everything that happened. About how we got a new family, and how Chris learned how to make pancakes, and how Grandma Eleanor taught me to grow flowers. Grandma Eleanor. Christopher smiled at the title Lily had bestowed upon his mother within weeks of coming home from the hospital. Eleanor had embraced it with a joy that had surprised everyone, especially Christopher, who had never seen his mother so openly affectionate with anyone. They stopped first at Marcus's grave, where Eleanor's weekly flowers had been joined by a new tradition, fresh drawings from Lily, protected in weatherproof frames that Christopher had installed. Today's offering was a picture of their new family standing outside the house they'd bought together 3 months ago, a modest 4-bedroom colonial with a big backyard and a garden where Eleanor was teaching Lily to grow roses. Hi, Daddy Marcus, Lily said, her voice carrying the easy familiarity of a child who had never stopped believing in the connection between earth and heaven. I brought everyone to meet you properly this time. Zara knelt beside the wheelchair, placing a kiss on top of Lily's head before speaking to the headstone. Marcus, you'd be so proud of her. She fought so hard, and she's getting stronger every day." Her voice was steady now, no longer broken by the desperate grief that had defined her 6 months ago. "And you'd like Chris, I think. He keeps his promises, just like you did." Christopher stepped forward, feeling the familiar tightness in his chest that came every time he visited this place. "Marcus, I know we never met, but I want you to know that I understand now what you meant about love being enough. Zara and Lily taught me that. They saved me in ways that had nothing to do with money." He paused, looking at the man's name carved in stone, trying to find words for something that felt too big for language. "I promised to love them the way you would have. Not because I'm trying to replace you, no one could do that. But because they deserve to be loved completely, unconditionally, forever." Eleanor stepped forward with her weekly roses, but this time she added something new, a small framed photo of their family from Lily's 8th birthday party the week before. All 4 of them crowded together around a homemade cake, covered in flour from their disastrous attempt at baking, laughing at some joke Lily had told. "Marcus," Eleanor said softly, "thank you for raising such an extraordinary daughter. She's teaching my son things I never could." They moved next to Eleanor's husband's grave, where Lily insisted on leaving a small bouquet of daisies. "Hi, Grandpa William," she said to the headstone. "I brought you flowers because Grandma Eleanor says you liked yellow ones. Thank you for giving her such a big heart that she had room to love extra people." Christopher knelt beside Lily's wheelchair, looking at his father's name for the first time in years without feeling the crushing weight of expectations and disappointment. "Dad," he said quietly, "I finally figured out what you were trying to teach me about love. You were just using the wrong currency." Their final stop was the small grave that had started everything, the resting place of Lily's birth mother, Sarah Chun, who had died too young and left behind a daughter who barely remembered her face but had been loved enough in 3 short years to carry that love forward through foster care, through loss, through a stepmother who chose to become her mother in every way that mattered. "Hi, birth mommy," Lily said, her ritual as established as breathing. "Mama Zara says you're probably friends with Daddy Marcus in heaven now, and that you both sent Chris and Grandma Eleanor to help us when we needed it most." Zara placed a single white rose on the grave. "Sarah, I hope you know that I love her like she's my own. I hope you know that she'll always carry part of you with her, and that I'll make sure she knows how much you loved her." Christopher had never spoken to this grave before, but today felt different. Today felt like completion. "Sarah," he said, "I promise to help Zara make sure Lily knows she was wanted from the very beginning. That she's always been surrounded by love, even when it came from places she couldn't see." As they prepared to leave the cemetery, Lily asked Christopher to push her wheelchair to the bench overlooking the pond where ducks paddled lazily in the afternoon sun. "Daddy Chris," she said, the title that still made his heart skip every time he heard it, "can I tell you a secret?" "Always, sweetheart. I knew you were going to be part of our family before you did." Christopher smiled, settling on the bench beside her wheelchair while Zara and Eleanor fed breadcrumbs to the ducks nearby. "How did you know that?" "Because the first time I saw you through my hospital window, you were crying," Lily said matter-of-factly. "And people only cry for strangers if they're going to love them." "Is that so?" Hum. "Plus, you had sad eyes like Mama Zara used to have. And sad people need families to make them happy again." Christopher felt that familiar tightness in his chest, but this time it was pure gratitude. "You're very wise, Miss Lily." "I know," she said with the confident matter-of-factness that had become her trademark since recovery. "Daddy Marcus used to say that sick kids get extra wisdom to make up for being sick. I think he was right. I think he was too." Lily was quiet for a moment, watching her mother and grandmother laugh at something while the ducks splashed around their feet. "Daddy Chris, are you happy now?" Christopher looked at this extraordinary child who had taught him that love wasn't something you earned or bought or deserved, but something you received and gave and shared, like breath or sunlight or the turning of seasons. "I'm happier than I ever imagined possible," he said truthfully. "Good. Because we're happy too, and families are supposed to be happy together." That evening, they gathered around the dinner table in their house, a ritual that had become sacred to all of them. Eleanor had cooked her famous pot roast, Zara had made cornbread from her grandmother's recipe, and Lily had insisted on setting the table with the good china, because every day with family is special enough for fancy plates. "I have an announcement," Christopher said as they settled in for dessert, chocolate cake that Lily had helped Eleanor bake earlier that day. 3 pairs of expectant eyes turned toward him. "I got a call from Dr. Rodriguez today," he continued. Lily's latest test results came back completely clear. No signs of infection, no signs of cancer. She's officially in remission. The celebration that followed was joyful chaos. Lily cheering from her wheelchair, Zara crying happy tears, Eleanor already making plans for a celebration party. But Christopher found himself watching quietly, memorizing this moment when everything they had hoped and fought and prayed for had finally come to pass. Later that night, after Lily had been tucked into bed with her favorite stories and Eleanor had driven home with promises to return for breakfast in the morning, Christopher and Zara found themselves on the front porch swing, watching fireflies dance in the twilight. "Thank you," Zara said softly. "For what?" "For learning how to love us the right way. For staying even when it was hard. For keeping your promises." Christopher took her hand, marveling at how natural it felt, how right. "Thank you for teaching me what love actually is," he said. "For letting me be part of something real." "It was always going to be you," Zara said, resting her head against his shoulder. "From that first day in the cemetery, when you could have walked away but didn't. Lily knew it, your mother knew it. I think I knew it too, even when I was too scared to admit it." Scared of what? Scared of hoping. Scared of believing that someone could love us without trying to change us or fix us or save us. Christopher pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You didn't need saving. You were already saving each other. I just needed to learn how to be worthy of being included. And now I wake up every morning grateful for another day with my family. Now I understand why people talk about love like it's magic. Because it is magic." Lily's sleepy voice drifted through her open bedroom window above them. "And magic is what makes families last forever." Christopher and Zara looked up to see their daughter hanging out of her window, grinning down at them with the irrepressible joy that had carried her through the darkest months of their lives. "Lily Grace Williams Hamilton," Zara called up, "what are you doing out of bed?" "Watching my parents be mushy," Lily replied with a giggle. "It's very entertaining." "Williams Hamilton?" Christopher asked quietly. "We talked about it while you were at work yesterday," Zara explained. "She wants to hyphenate. Keep her daddy Marcus's name but add yours too." Christopher felt tears prick his eyes. "I'd be honored." "Good, because I already told my teacher at school that my daddy Chris was coming to Career Day next month to talk about how rich people can learn to be nice people." Christopher burst out laughing. "Is that what I'm going to talk about?" "Yep. And how families are like flowers. They grow better when they have good soil and lots of love and people who take care of them even when they can't take care of themselves." "That's beautiful, baby girl," Zara called up to her. "I know. I'm very smart. Now can you please kiss Daddy Chris so I can go to sleep? All this mushy stuff is making me tired." Christopher looked at Zara, who was laughing so hard she could barely breathe. "I guess we'd better not disappoint our audience," he said. "I guess not," Zara agreed. And as Christopher kissed the woman who had taught him that love was about showing up, about staying, about choosing each other every single day, he heard their daughter's satisfied voice drift down from the window above. "There we go. Now that's what a happy family looks like." Christopher Hamilton had spent his entire life trying to buy love, to earn it, to prove he was worthy of it. But it turned out that love had been waiting for him all along in a hospital room, in the fierce heart of a little girl who saw angels in ordinary people, in the strength of a woman who refused to let grief defeat hope, in the quiet wisdom of a mother who had been loving strangers at gravesites for 15 years without expecting anything in return. It turned out that love wasn't something you purchased. It was something you received, like grace. And something you gave, like flowers. Forever.